everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for the book Star Wars Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader by James Luceno. This is a Star Wars Legends book, otherwise known as the Expanded Universe, taking place pretty much directly after Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And this was one of my rereads this year. I've been trying to do a lot more rereads, and so far I have reread at least one book each month or so. And in the case of this month, I read two. So I wanted to revisit some old books that I had read some years back and see what I think of them now, and this is one that I chose. It had been probably about 7 or 8 years since I read this book. I hadn't read it since I was in high school, and it was one that I really enjoyed, but I wanted to revisit it and see what I thought of it now. And I would say I really enjoyed this book quite a bit. I don't know if I loved it as much as I did back in high school, but it was still a very enjoyable book, and it was nice to revisit and kind of refresh my memory and all those kinds of things. So to get started talking about some good stuff with this book, of which there are several things that I'd like to talk about, I loved the setup for this book, which is basically, like I said, immediately following Revenge of the Sith. In fact, the first, I can't remember exactly, maybe 70 or 80 pages. The book is split into, like, I think 4 parts, and all of part 1 is taking place during Revenge of the Sith, and then the rest of the book is after. The setup for this book basically is seeing the events of Order 66 in Revenge of the Sith, which is basically all of part 1, and then the immediate aftermath of it, which I thought was super cool. I know that, especially nowadays, with its prevalence in new Star Wars media, like, you know, some of the video games, some of the TV shows, seeing perspectives on Order 66 now is kind of something that at least in my circles of Star Wars fans, has become kind of like they're doing Order 66 again type of thing. But I always really enjoy seeing different perspectives on Order 66, seeing how, how the Jedi are reacting to it, how the clones are reacting to it in this case as well. And the immediate aftermath of it, I think, is a very interesting idea to explore. And so I really enjoy just the general premise of this book, which is essentially just that. The first part of this book tells Order 66 from the perspective of both a group of Jedi as well as the clones around them, which is really cool. And then the Jedi, continue, and I think some of the clones as well, continue to be recurring throughout the rest of the book. And then the other side of this book, which obviously, this book has the name Darth Vader in the title. It's called The Rise of Darth Vader. So obviously Darth Vader is very prevalent in this book, and fittingly so, considering that, Order 66 and the Revenge of the Sith were kind of important for him. So the book after part 1 is basically split between these Jedi fleeing and trying to find other Jedi to connect with after Order 66 in order to group together, to look out for each other, try to figure out how to restore the Jedi Order and things like that, how to take down the Empire, all that stuff. And then you have this other side of the story, which is Vader, after Revenge of the Sith, dealing with the new position that he's put in, having to deal with this suit, which is very iconic, obviously, but is clearly not a positive change for him. And the way that was explored was really good, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And his side of the story being, trying to hunt down these Jedi and also getting into his psyche a little bit after Revenge of the Sith. And just all of that stuff I thought was really well done. It's a really interesting premise, and I love the idea of, exploring these events specifically, and from these specific perspectives as well, having, the surviving Jedi and Darth Vader immediately after Revenge of the Sith. It's kind of similar to one of the reasons why I really enjoy the book Kenobi by John Jackson Miller, which I would actually say is a very excellent companion to this book, because you also follow in that book Obi-Wan shortly after the events of Revenge of the Sith. So, and I'm sure there are several other Star Wars books dealing with similar ideas, which I have not read, but I hope to sometime. But great setup. Love that whole idea behind this book. And then as far as, those different parts of the story itself, I really love the way Vader is handled in this book. I've always thought anytime that Star Wars media in general looks at Darth Vader as a character, after he's turned to the dark side and everything, I've always thought that was really interesting, because just the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker and all of that is just one of the most interesting things things in Star Wars to me, which makes sense because it's kind of the whole thing of the first 6 movies. And so I love when you get to dive into Vader's psyche and the way that he's feeling about the situation he's in, especially in this case being directly after everything has happened to him, between turning to the dark side and killing all the Jedi and losing Padme, losing Obi-Wan, all these things, becoming this, more machine now than man, as Obi-Wan says. And all that stuff was really interesting, and I really enjoyed seeing that explored. I don't think it was explored quite in as much depth as I might have liked in this book, but I did enjoy the parts of it that were there. There was a particular chapter, I think early in part 2, that really went deep into this idea of, Vader in the suit and how just broken he is over everything that's happened, and how the suit is keeping him alive, but it's also a prison. And that's really good stuff. Like, just the way that Vader's handled in this book, I think was awesome. And I really enjoyed that about it. And again, going to the other side of the story with the Jedi, I really enjoyed their side of the story. Out of everything in this book, that was the one part where it was probably my least favorite part of the book, I would say. I think there were certain sections that were not as interesting to me, but I did enjoy just the concept of it, and I enjoyed the storyline that they had of, trying to stay ahead of the Empire and try to find these other Jedi that they can connect with and things like that. I thought that was really cool, and seeing especially, again, the more character-centric side of that. The Jedi characters, to me, were not super compelling in themselves, which I think is the biggest problem with this book that I have, is that the Jedi, to me, in this book, are not compelling characters that much in themselves, but I think they work very, very well as a way to show how the aftermath of Order 66 affected the surviving Jedi. And so I think, even though they're not amazing characters in their own right, I really appreciate the role that they fill in the story. And so that I thought was really interesting, exploring, the way the Jedi are feeling and all that stuff, what they're kind of thinking, what they're going through, having to adjust to this very, very different situation. It was really interesting. But yeah, as far as things that I didn't like about this book, there wasn't a whole lot. Really, the only things was some of the stuff with the Jedi side of the story I was not as invested in. It was still good, but there were certain parts where I was, not quite into it. And I also just didn't think those specific characters were super compelling, but I really enjoyed the role that they filled in the story and the way that they explored the idea of Jedi post-Order 66. So even then, I still enjoyed their side of the story quite a bit. It just wasn't so much on a, actual character level, I guess. But overall, this was a really good book. I really enjoyed it a lot. Had some great stuff to it, had a lot of really memorable moments, and really enjoyed the more introspective, character-focused sections of it, especially in relation to Darth Vader, and then also, examining the events that it handles, which I think it does very, very well, and was really an interesting book to read. And I would highly recommend this one as well, especially for those of you who love Revenge of the Sith or the Imperial era, or are very interested in the Jedi Purge or things like that. I think this is a great book to read, and I think you'll really enjoy it. As far as a rating out of 10 that I would give this book, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Very, very enjoyable. Really enjoyed it a lot. Had some great stuff to it. Just, like I said, those couple things brought it down a little bit for me, but even then, a lot of the rest of the book I really enjoyed a lot. And I had a great time with it. So that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you have read Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, and what you thought of it if so. And that's pretty much all for this video. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.